days. So this is the world I'm really seeking to create for everyone. So my word would be equity. And I now would like to start our discussion with the focus topic of today, which is International Women's Day, right? And Leah, you said your word was every day, right? And I found this was really an interesting start, right? Should we have International Women's Day every day, or should we be in a position every day that we don't need it anymore? So do we need International Women's Day? Why do we need it? What's your thoughts around it? And maybe what role does International Women's Day also play in your company at Swarovski?
Yeah, thank you, Christine, for the question. For me, it's not a either or. It's great to have both, right? It's great to have a day where we can really put women into the spotlight. But as said before, it should not be that one day. And in Swarovski, it's actually part of our nature and of our DNA to celebrate women, because our jewelry is really designed to celebrate women, and also to even make their natural beauty even more beautiful. It's important to understand that 70% of worldwide spendings are controlled by women. And we are very, very mindful that our group that buys our products and actually also men mostly buy them for their beloved women is very much also in the spotlight for us every day. You asked, what do we do on that special day, Christina? We have several activities which are also for us very great as a company to remind of the importance of women also for our business model and for us as employer. At Swarovski, 78% are actually women. So that's a quite big portion of our workforce. We have several cool activities, just to name some of them. So we do photo campaigns with selfies and virtual team photos with the Choose to Challenge pose. The Choose to Challenge pose is particularly calling out that we challenge gender stereotypes and bias. And we really want to create together this inclusive world. We also offer digital learning activities to foster equality and also discuss the gender bias. And we also have fire chats with several leaders. What I particularly found very great is the collaboration with the Swarovski Foundation and our partner Mothers to Mothers. That's an Africa-based non-governmental organization, and they are aiming to end HIV. And they are actually training and employing women as frontline health workers against HIV. So it's also important that we not just look to the westernized world, but really to also other continents where women play a very, very relevant role. And then finally, I think you will like that also as host, that we are working with the I Am Remarkable activity from Google, where we do a lot of virtual workshops also to give a platform to women to talk about their empowerments. And that really helps us to celebrate these wonderful women every day.
Oh, that's of course wonderful to hear. Thank you for calling that out. But I hear so much positive feedback around I'm Remarkable. But everything else, very interesting. And I think it's great to see how active Swarovski celebrates the International Women's Day and how you bring that to life. And when I was listening to you, I thought about you, Orsholia, because you brought in the word everyone, right? We had every day and we had everyone. And as Leah was describing, if I got that right, you're more in a surrounding where a lot of women work, right? And Orsholia, you work for BCG, and I'm just curious how you see the situation in consultancy world and with all the background work that you do personally in BCG.
Thank you for the question. I think it's what is very important for us in BCG. We have still more men, of course, than women in the company itself. So for us, it's quite important to change work practices for everybody, not only for women. Otherwise, it creates another differentiation, which may be counterproductive. So, for example, in BCG Switzerland, just a couple of years ago, we've introduced 14 weeks paternity leave for men. And I was part of the team that worked on the proposal. And interestingly, it actually generated a lot of discussion in the office that if we are aiming to help women, how does something we offer to men help women? And then actually it was kind of a learning process that we all went through, understanding that, for young women at the firm, seeing that one of the senior partners is actually taking several months off to take care of their children or leaving early to pick them up from the kita, that's the strongest possible signal that they are also allowed to do that and feel good about it. So actually, and that also connects to the role modeling a little bit, is role models can be both men and women, modeling a lifestyle that's acceptable for both parents. So I think that's a reflection on how we try to live with the everyone mantra internally. And as for our clients, I mean, there what we see quite often is and what we are also working on, and also what we use the International Women Days for, is we've just published quite a lot of research on why diversity and inclusion really makes a difference. Not necessarily from a social issue point of view, and not only to be nice, and because this is a core value, but actually how it contributes to business results. And there's quite a lot of research that shows more diverse teams benefit everybody. Companies perform better under pressure, teams are more productive, everybody has a better experience. So it's actually in everybody's interest to be inclusive.
Wonderful. It's really, I think, a very important part of this discussion, that we really need everyone. And Miriam, maybe over to you, because you also have this HR background, and I'm pretty sure you have both in mind, right? Women and men. And maybe you can share some of the things that you need create a big impact in creating a more an atmosphere where everyone can thrive.
Thanks for the question. I think what's important is to have allies and to realize that if we want to have a more equitable, more diverse environment and where women thrive, then men have to get on board too. And there's many business cases to say that a more diverse team is a more successful team. Companies are more successful if their teams are diverse. And so what we've been trying to show our own teams and also the startups we work with is it's in their interest to actually get women on board, have them in key leadership positions, have them in key roles. And I think what's also important is just to make sure that when we hire women, they might be different, and that's okay too. And I think a lot of people assume that when you hire women, they should perform to the same standards and they should be like the better men. So, write emails the same way, perform the same way, work the same way. And what would be great is if we could create working environments where more different work styles, different approaches, different points of views are valued, are appreciated, are encouraged, so that when you have women who are often super educated, have all the experience, but come into a new situation, which they might be a little bit just new to and might approach a project or an issue differently, feel appreciated, feel seen, and have the opportunity to actually bring in their ideas without fear of repercussions because they're doing it a little bit different. So long story short, I think it's really important to create environments where women are encouraged to perform, of course, but at the same time, maybe do it within their own style.
Wow, that's so full of really, I think, very important topics to call out. And because I feel like the topic it has so many perspectives, right? And so many nuances that you have to take into consideration. There's just no black and white. And it reminded me very much when I was listening to you that to create this equity, right, which already the word implies already, it's not everyone is equal, but we create fair chances. I really liked what you were saying. Vera, I wanted to come to you because when I listened to Miriam and Orsolya, I thought like you're a bit on the other end because you do coaching. And as far as I understood, it just naturally developed a bit that you do a lot of female coaching right now. So if Miriam and Orsolya work a lot with the employers, right, to create a good surrounding and what can we do with hiring, and maybe we can go into that a bit deeper afterwards. But what do you see? What creates the change that we need in your work as a coach with female leaders or female talent?
Well, first of all, I want to add something because I always have the feeling, or at least I had the feeling like the last few days, that our Western environment suddenly gets tired of days like this. And we ask ourselves the question, is it still relevant for us? And I have to say, of course it is relevant. I mean, 3 weeks ago, there was not only the Valentine's Day, we all remember, but it was also the Equal Pay Day. And as long as this Equal Pay Day is in the month of February, I think we definitely need this day to remind ourselves that there is a lot to do and there is a long way to go. We are not there. And also what Leah mentioned, and I'm very happy about that nuance in what you told us what Swarovski is doing. We always have to keep in mind that not all women around the world are as privileged as we are here. And as long as we have this situation, of course, we need to remind ourselves to have days like this. Yeah, and we need really to focus on what is still missing and what kind of situation we all want to develop for the future, and also for our kids, for example. But coming back to your question, Christina, thanks for that. That's, of course, quite interesting for me, because when I switched the side, so to say, of course, I also got a new perspective in my work. And actually, as you mentioned, this female focus, it happened to me. I wasn't really intentionally seeking for that, but as I was actually for some of younger women kind of a role model, many women asked me if I would coach them. And so I saw that there is, this need of having extra programs for women. And what I see and observe there is, and we're going to talk a lot about upskilling, of course, later on. Besides that need of upskilling, of course, the personal development is also so important. It's not only that we, get to know more competences and more know-how. It's also about developing our personalities. And actually, this is something what coaching can do, and what coaching is a very great tool of, having a new perspective to everything that happens around you. So that's actually the reason why I founded those two programs.
Wonderful to hear. And Nina, I was when Vera talked about this, I really had your specific mission in mind, right? Like the female founders. And I was like, I probably, it's very much connected to what Vera said, right? Is it about thinking big enough, right? Having role models. What's your thought on this? Does role models really play an important role for your female founders, for example, and overall? And what do you think? Do you see a big difference in the female founders versus the famous, glamorous world of the whole startup industry, which is, as we all know, very male-dominated?
So there's definitely a clear yes that I can say when I look at our community, that role models are really important also in the work that we are doing. And also many of the things that Miriam and Vera mentioned now in their last statements, they resonated quite a lot with me, because first of all, what we see is that many people still think that there is like this blueprint type of founder, and only that type of founder can be successful. So if we talk about entrepreneurship and also unicorns and startup investing, many people think of people like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, etc. And yes, they are definitely very inspiring personalities, but also they are personalities where the majority of the world cannot really feel how they are doing and how they are acting, because they are just different. And that's also totally okay. And a very big part of the work that we are doing at Female Founders is really also putting the women and men on the stage that are different from that sort of blueprint personality, to show how many different faces entrepreneurship can have. And also looking at the companies we are already working with today, there are so many female entrepreneurs out there already who are building amazing startups, amazing business cases, and that luckily also already receive investments. And what we do is basically also connect them to our crowd of usually first-time founders, who are very excited but also scared about building a business for the very first time, something that I can very much relate to, and also showing them like the more human side that all of these successful people have. And of course, at the very bottom of our hearts, we all know that regardless of how successful somebody is, regardless if they're male or female, etc., all of them are humans, and all of them have their fears and and things to talk about and think about, but that's often not reflected in the media or in the image that they convey. And that's a big part of our work, to give women this opportunity to also look behind that glass, so to say, and to make sure that they are encouraged and have all the tools they need to grow their businesses. And that's the same basically also for the investor side, that is still very homogeneous as well. Nowadays, luckily, that's changing a lot already here in Europe. But also if female founders sit at the table with investors, usually they are at the same table with men. And also making sure that the awareness out there is loud and clear, that also this has to change, because diversity on both ends basically then results hopefully in a cycle of change where more female investors will also attract more female founders, and the other way around. And that's why we think that collaborating with other stakeholders in the ecosystem is key, to make sure that things change, and they hopefully change fast, because there is still a lot of room for improvement in the European tech ecosystem. And yeah, that's what we try to focus on.
That sounds really fantastic. And I wanted to ask you, actually, I was planning to ask you what can we do more to seize role models, but I feel like you really try to max it out as from your side as much as you can. So I thought, like, what would be your wish to a country, right? Or even beyond the country, because as you said, you work throughout different countries. Is there something that you would send out as a call to action to just the wider economy or ecosystems out there? That would be one question. And the other question would be if you have specific things that you would call out for Austria or for Switzerland, in case those two countries play a significant role for you as well.
So yes, for the broader European tech ecosystem, it would probably be good if those people who decide where the money is going, and that includes like all the big fund of funds, the banks who are then limited partners in the smaller funds that then deploy the money in certain ecosystems and regions, if they thought about changing their criteria of where their money is invested in the future. So this is on the one hand a big opportunity for all business models working on a better future for our planet when it comes to climate tech and sustainability, but also in terms of gender and diversity, because those big players like the European Investment Fund, for instance, they can really make a difference if their money has a certain mark on it, that it has to go to also certain types of business models and founding teams. And yes, that's of course then always connecting to a discussion about quotas. But at the end of the day, I think if you really want to change things, this is one of the measures that we should look at, and that can really make a difference. Because there's also one thing that is definitely the case for the group of women that we are working with. Women, they get so many offers for mentoring. And that's nice, because that's already a start, and that means that this organization or brand or institution has realized that there is a certain level of attention that the founders, for instance, need. But mentoring is not enough. So there's the saying of women being over-mentored and under-sponsored. And unfortunately, that's just something that is very true for our target group. And where I think it's time to change, as there are so many founders and startups out there that deserve the attention of potential partners, investors, buyers, clients. And it's now the time to change that and to foster that.
I really like that. There are a lot of really concrete things that we can tackle with. Vera, I saw you nodding your head a lot when it came to quotas, and I think that has been a discussion when I was following that over the last years. I think there is a lot of change happening also on the perception of women themselves, right?
Yeah.
I just thought if you have had anything around that in your head.
Yeah, I was nodding maybe because this is a piece of my personal story. Because as I mentioned before, I had a very fast career in digital communication, and for me, it sometimes happened that I was a quota woman, yeah, and I never had the perception that this is anything bad. But that time, like it was, I would say 12, maybe 15 years ago, whenever I said that, I noticed that everyone I told that was like, oh my God, what is she saying? Yeah. But I'm very happy that now at this time, we're having a complete new perception on that whole discussion, that everyone knows that this is so important that we start with that. So as Nina just mentioned, yeah, so we need to have a structural change and then we can move on. So actually, that was just my little story about the quotas.
Thanks for sharing this. Miriam, I wanted to hand it over to you. Yeah, you wanted to say something, Amy.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, I agree with everything that Vera and Nina just said. And, as the HR person from the hiring points of view, but also working for Speed Invest, a fund, I just wanted to share some of my thoughts or a lot of what we're discussing within the Speed Invest universe right now, which is absolutely. I mean, quota, I feel, still has this very negative connotation. So, we like talking about hiring goals, but we look very, very closely at how we can attract more women. If we have more women investors, we also think, like Nina said, more female-founded startups will feel comfortable with Speed Invest and will even maybe approach Speed Invest more for funding. And women will look more closely and will then hopefully see them. So we look a lot at, how are we writing the ads and where are we hiring and what are our hiring strategies? Why are more men than women applying? And what does our hiring process look like? So we've taken a lot of steps in the last year or 2 years to hopefully bring more people on board. And at the same time, we're also looking at our own portfolio and looking critically. And we're, the first step is, I think, data, looking at the status quo, where are we at? How many female-founded founder teams do we have? How can we broaden and widen the applicant pool and the startup pool that we review, that we look at? So I think over the last year especially, there's been a huge step towards really looking at this critically and acknowledging there are goals we need to set ourselves and we have to take big strides. But I'm also quite proud of the fact that we are doing a lot already. So just as a side note, we have a diversity and inclusion task force internally. And so a lot of these initiatives that I just mentioned, looking at our hiring strategy internally and looking at how we source deals, how we meet tech talent across Europe is changing. So I'm really, really proud of that. But it's a process and it takes time and it takes, patience a little bit also to make sure we're hitting those goals.
When I listened to your input, I had something strong in my mind, because it seems like we're all doing a lot when it comes to female empowerment, fostering opportunities for women. But can it be really resolved within one company, right? Also, Leah, when you said what you do in Swarovski, and there's so many great things done, but at the same time, and this is why I think it's so wonderful that we have this panel today, right? Because this is one way of connecting and finding ideas of how we can join forces, right? And bring it to a next level and bring it just bring more power to it by connecting. And I thought about you, Leah, and Osholia. Does that resonate with you? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, from my side, Christine, totally. It is very much about this also network. I mean, you can never do things alone, not as one single company. You can never do things alone as one single individual. And exactly such rounds really help also to provide that positive energy also from Switzerland to Austria and back, and even also to other countries. And I would like to also also mention that what you said before with the role models, right? It's very, very relevant that we learn from each and anybody of us, right? It doesn't have to be a woman, it doesn't have to be a man, it can be whatever, gender, whatever cultural background. And I personally really, really loved all the role models in my life that never made a difference between a man and a woman. Those were my parents. They never made a difference. Those were my teachers. They never made a difference. Those were my bosses, my male bosses, that never made a difference. So in that sense, it's each and anybody, and this sharing of those positive experiences will also generate that feeling. So in that sense, such rounds are really, really encouraging. And I hope we continue with such rounds, not just on International Women's Day, but maybe not every day, but as much as possible.
I take this as an input, and we will plan our next session. I also had the idea we should really do this on a regular basis. Arshania, what about the importance of companies bringing this topic forward compared to industry-wide or even broader groups? Is that something that you also maybe thought about it upfront already?
I think there may be two angles to this question. So on one hand, as we talked about personal role models, I think we also need corporate role models. Companies who say, okay, even if my government doesn't require it, or maybe it's not the common practice in this country, I'll still go ahead and do it. And that, I think, eventually brings the whole industry with it. And I think that's why it's very important that the companies really look a little bit behind what do I want to stand for, what do I want to attract the workforce with. I think especially for younger generations, diversity at the workplace, work-life balance, being able to have a family while working is becoming so important that once one company goes ahead and offers certain benefits, the others will be eventually kind of forced to follow. Otherwise, they won't get that talent anymore. So I think one aspect is the corporate role models, which we also need. But then the other aspect is one needs to consider the whole ecosystem and the culture of the country. So when I worked I did this project with BCG for a Middle Eastern government, and the question was how to get more women in the workforce. And basically we did benchmarking looking at the workforce participation rate of women in all the countries around the world. And there are very different profiles, and countries can be at a very different level of cultural development. For example, you have the Nordics, where the participation is incredibly high, but is also supported by men and women equally likely to take paternity, maternity leave, part-time working models, good work-life balance, etc. The whole ecosystem is there. But for example, in some of the countries where women are just about to enter the workforce, they are facing different challenges. So just to give you an example, this was already several years back, but we looked at a quota program one of the Middle Eastern governments introduced, where in each company board, you were required to have one female board member. The problem was they introduced this a bit too early, because basically what happened, there weren't enough women in business long enough who would have had the experience to sit on boards. So basically what the quota did is the same 20 women were now sitting on 5 boards per person, which is still an impact, but maybe not the impact they were really going for. So I think from a government perspective, one needs to be quite careful of which steps are good at the certain development level that really support the culture to move to the next level, and not introducing things that we just copy from other countries who are maybe 30, 40 years ahead.
That's very interesting. I looked up numbers, and I mean, there is different studies out there, but I think the message overall is the same, right? We don't have, even here, not enough female board representatives, right? I think in Austria it's 25% and Switzerland 26%, according to PwC study. And in UK and Italy, for example, it was 37%. So, okay, one could assume that our cultural background is not too different, but do you think that that we could, at least from Austria and Switzerland perspective, look into countries like UK or Italy to just see what we can do better in order to just have a more diverse or more gender parity within boards?
I think definitely yes. So I think from Austria, Switzerland perspective, there isn't really anything that would hold back these countries from looking at either the Nordics or UK or some of the countries that are a little bit more ahead. But still, one needs to consider is there is still a little bit of a cultural resistance. I think also in Switzerland, if we want to be honest, I think also women got the voting right quite late, and it has not been. It's still, I think, in many cases, not the standard family model that the women work. So it's one can say it's good or bad. That's not necessarily the question. It's like, what are people comfortable with? What is an acceptable next step? So, if I was the Swiss government, I would definitely look for a couple more incentives, but not going with the super heavy guns necessarily ahead. Otherwise, it creates more of an inverse reaction. And I think it's also something that has to go with the philosophy of the government. And Switzerland is more enabling, encouraging than prescribing people to do things. And I think this is an important value to people who live here. So also whatever support mechanism is chosen would have to go in that direction.
Yeah, that sounds super inspirational. One post that I saw today or yesterday around International Women's Day was from Aviva Wittenberg-Cox, and she does a lot of work around female leadership. And she called out the record number of women to high global office in public sector, right? If we think about Christine Lagarde, and also we have a vice president now in the US. And she was like, we know from data, and Oszolja, you were mentioning this, that it's just a business factor of bringing gender parity to leadership, to boards, to companies, right? And she was like, why are we still lagging behind in the private sector? It seems like that at least the public sector really did some strong signals, right? Any thoughts around that? I don't know, Oszolja or anyone else who wants to jump in. Miriam, yeah?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think that a lot of people think that the solution still is to hire more women into roles and then brush themselves off by saying, oh, we didn't get enough women applicants. I think a lot more needs to be done in investing in women and in their training to make sure that the women we hire today in 5 years, in 10 years, then get into these leadership roles, into board meetings. And I think also, just to add, because we're also right now working on a new parental leave policy. And for example, we have a lot of, young men who are taking time off. And I think it's an amazing signal to send. We've had multiple men take time off, extended time off, which hopefully, if that becomes the norm in the future, I'm hopeful that will become the future, that it will be completely normal to take an extended period of time off as a man, so that it won't be so different when companies hire men or women. I think many companies still think, well, if we hire a woman between 25 and 35, then chances are very high she's going to leave. So then you see young women getting hired, but then as people get older, less and less women are getting hired into very crucial roles from which you can then grow into further leadership roles. And then ultimately, when you look at these statistics, I think you have way too few women. So I think that we have to invest into women early. It's not just about hiring women into roles, but also making sure that the women that you have on your team feel empowered, get the training they need, get the opportunity to apply those skills, so they get projects assigned, get the opportunity to actually shine and show that they can excel, so that ultimately you can promote them when the time comes.
Yeah, really creating this. Yes, please.
I think, but we still shouldn't forget there is also a challenge in society. We still can see in so many studies that when men are getting more and more successful, they're getting more and more popular. And it's completely the other way around for women. And as long as this situation keeps with us, it's going to be this very unfair game, because it's not only that we are offering abilities or possibilities, it's also that we need actually women who want to take the chance. And so this is also one fact we should never forget about that.
Yeah, very important part of the whole of all the things that we need to do to make a change. And this is what I wanted to ask, right? Do we feel that we do enough? I mean, it's International Women's Day, and wanted to like close the loop a bit, and just was interested in what would you see as really next steps. Is it enough top of mind, right? I heard different aspects of it, right? Or so you also said, hey, let's keep in mind where society is and not just overwhelm them. But on the other hand, let's just not stop doing things. So maybe we do a bit of a closing round, and I start with you, Leah, if that's fine for you, because you helped us with these great opening words on the International Women's Day. Are we doing enough, and what are the next steps?
Yeah, I think generally, I mean, we should always do more for the ones that really, deserve it and that need our help, right? I mean, we said before, for example, women in Africa or people in other countries, right? Where like Osholia explained about her project there, right? Here we can never do enough. Also for what Miriam said, right? To really help providing opportunities for younger people. And I also truly believe that a success of a woman is always how successful and strong her man is, or her husband or her partner is behind her, right? So I think let's not forget also to take all these wonderful and strong men along the way that help their partners. And I would guess all of our partners are this type, right? That also help us to have these careers and stand behind this. So let's also not forget to celebrate them. But I'm also with Orsolia, when people, are happy with where they go. It's also good, right? If a woman decides, for me, it's not the right way to go into a career, but I would like to stay with my family, that's also not a bad thing, right? I have lots of good friends who say, hey, for me, I'm much happier in that role and it's much more for me. That's also great, right? I think in the end, and that's what I have also really decided with my husband, with our boy and with our girl, we give them all opportunities they have. We will absolutely give them the opportunity to look into tech, to understand what's there. But if my girl decides for a, let's say very female job, or if she decides to stay with her family, that's also fine, as long as she is happy. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to help people who want to grow in their career, but also, as Orsolia said, if people are fine, we don't have to push them into a certain direction. That's my personal opinion. Everybody should find the way for him and herself that makes them truly happy and passionate.
Thank you, Leah.
I want to add something immediately. I want to call out for all the single moms out there. There is a chance to have a career as a single mom. Just to add that. And as we talked about the governments, Osholia talked about, and I thought this is also one very interesting topic. We should definitely also talk about the smallest governments we have, I mean families. Because I think role models, we don't only need them at work or in companies, but we also need them and live them in families, because it's definitely a matter what we are role modeling for our children, what they can develop as visions and as possibilities for them and for the future. And I think coming up to the point together again, definitely it's not only about girls, it's also about boys. Yeah, and we must not forget that, of course, we have to empower the girls, but definitely we shouldn't forget the boys. And one thing which is also quite important for me, because we talked about the chances that women can develop when they're in the working force, I think we should be aware that, for example, we cannot tell small girls to be calm and sweet during childhood and then expect them to stand on stage or leading a company when they're 25, 27 or so. So this also has to be changed. We definitely, I mean, your question was, Christina, what else should we do, should we consider to do? I think we have to really rethink about how we treat our children and include boys and girls.
Thank you so much, Vera. As a mother of two boys, I'm fully with you. And thanks for bringing this aspect into this discussion. As I said, we we definitely need to talk again, because it's not an easy thing where you just have one answer and then that's it, right? There is just so many different aspects. So thank you very much, Vera. We have officially 1 minute to go, but we started a bit later, so let's just take 2 or 3 minutes more. And I would ask Oszolja for some closing words from your side. What do we need to do more?
I think the best way to change practices is just by doing it. And with that, I'm again referring to individual role models, corporate role models. We don't necessarily need to change, the whole system or the whole society. Rather think, okay, in our context, most people would agree with providing this additional support to working mothers or making this change to how we work that would help diversity. Then let's do it. And one doesn't really need to overthink it, and then just hope that others will follow, even if it's not the current practice in the country. But I think that's the best motivation, basically, for people to do the same.
I like that very much. So we bring it down to earth and let's just do it. I think one step after the other is definitely one ingredient that we need, right? Nina, can I ask you next for what's top of mind, what we need to do more from your side?
Sure. So I'm very often in the situation that I'm asked if feminism is still a thing and if it's still necessary, and also if female founders is actually necessary. And honestly, if there was one point in my life where female founders would not be necessary any longer, I would be the happiest person in the world. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen so soon, even though we are very hard working on it. But that actually ties in to what Oszolja just said. I'm also a big fan of doing things. I'm also realizing that all of us, many of us, can actually start to change things today in our environment, in our families, with our friends, in our own companies. And that all of us can create impact if we want to, without any extra skills, resources that we have to acquire before doing so. And I'm a very strong supporter of that thought. But then, of course, in addition, yes, society and politics, they have to adapt as well. Otherwise, we as individuals, unfortunately, I don't think we can change it on our own.
Thank you so much, Nina. That's very much resonates with me as well. Miriam, can you just share your thoughts and really do a bit of a closing of this group? I would love to discuss even longer, but we have to come to an end. Thank you.
No, a super thoughtful conversation. Just to add, obviously, I agree with everything that was just said. We need to actually act. We need to create policies in companies, even if the law hasn't changed. Ideally, the law changes, but if law doesn't provide changes, we should implement new policies. And, the main thing I still want to add is just, I think we need to create awareness. Leah, if you said, for example, you had teachers that didn't differentiate between gender, you had bosses, I think you're a very, very lucky woman. I have witnessed discrimination many times myself, and as an HR professional, I was raised by very strong women. I have a very strong group of friends with exceptional women, and there are so many women with stories where they were slighted, they were spoken down to, they were passed on opportunities. So the main takeaway is create huge awareness that even in Western society, even in Austria, it still is a big topic. And I think we all have to work together to take some strides forward.
Thank you so much, Miriam. It's really, what a wonderful discussion, and so many, actually also new thoughts that just sparkled in my head when we were discussing. And I think we all thought about this topic a lot of times. So let's keep doing this, right? I took some of the things that resonated a lot with me, which was like, we need corporate role models. That was a really nice keyword, Oszolja, from your side, which I really like. It needs everyone, and it's a business topic, right? And we need to act. And that was just those 4 points that I took notes, because I thought this was really important. Thank you so much for taking the time. I was asked also to point out we had some technical issues that we as a group, I think, have not been aware of, but for the audience. So it seems that our intro round, unfortunately enough, was not broadcasted or was not streamed, but there is the opportunity to replay the video. So you could just dive into these great personalities that we have here and their introductions. which I would really recommend you to do. Thank you so much, Vera, Lea, Miriam, Nina, Osholia, for taking the time and having the discussion. I enjoyed it really very much. And thank you very much, everyone who listened to us, for taking the time. And let's really have a good action-based International Women's Day and speak soon again, I would say. That's my most important takeout. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.